I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about the fact, you've talked a lot about being influenced by 70s movies like Serpico and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Taxi Driver. And I'm curious if the starting point for this was you wanted to make a movie in that tradition and then tried to figure out a way to kind of smuggle it into the system, or was it started with the character Joker and you just figured out that was the right language for it? What was the starting point?
I have made a lot of movies about multiple characters, and I really wanted to do a deep dive sort of character study into one person. And those are tougher to get made. They're not made. I mean, Social Network is sort of a character study. There Will Be Blood is maybe the best one of the last 20 years. But they don't get made a lot in the studio system, and it's tough to get people to show up to them. And so then I sort of had this little bit twisted idea of, well, maybe you can get it made if you made it about one of those guys, meaning. So it was a little bit what you said, smuggling it through. But I'd always been, I'm not a huge comic book movie person. I see the movies and I appreciate them for what they are. And Chris Nolan's movies are incredible. But so I thought, oh, well, I've always liked the Joker of that whole thing, and so it kind of was a little bit of both in a way. But some, in all with all due honesty, and in all honesty, I was a little bit of kind of pushing a movie like that through the system,
And so,
somewhat.
what was the writing process like with Scott Silver? How long did it take you guys to hash out this script? And do you start out knowing what the basic story is going to be? Do you just start with the character? What's the evolution of the screenplay?
So I thought of that idea, and then I called up Scott. We had never written together, but I've known him for years, and we've always talked about working together. And I said, I have this crazy idea, and I told him what it was, which is 10% of what this is, as any writing is. And we just started meeting and fleshing it out, and it was really a series of backwards engineering and thinking, okay, what do we know about Joker? Well, he has a laugh. Well, he has a white face painted and green hair and all these sort of things that we've come to know about Joker, and then running them through as realistic a lens as possible. Well, why does he have a white face? Well, in the comics, he fell into a vat of acid. I don't believe that if you fall into a vat of acid, you're going to have a white face and green hair. So it was about running everything through a very, giving him an affliction for his laugh. And really, to go back to your first question, the exciting thing about doing a character study for me was how all the other things in the movie become characters, whether it's the cinematography or the music, which I think is a huge character in this film, the production design. These all become kind of front and center in a different way, and it was really exciting.
What kinds of conversations did you have with Todd initially about what the influences and references were going to be like, and what did you take from those 70s movies? What did you recognize in their cinematography that you thought was applicable here?
Yeah, I think that puts it pretty squarely on the head, which is it was less about referencing them very specifically, and more about our memory of what those movies were and their influences on us as filmmakers, as just an audience member, and what our memory of that time in space was. Certainly, it's like we are making a movie that's a period piece of a city that is similar in essence to New York. Todd grew up in New York. I grew up across the bridge in New Jersey. So I had familiar memories, and I think that was in large part what influenced the look and feel. The specific references to those movies were less so. And even if we did reference them, because we thought, oh, network would be great. Let's look at the, I don't know, talk show or whatever it is on some specific thing. Even King of Comedy, which people think like the movie is like, whole, referenced like they're like literally going, look at that shot, and I'm going, we never even watched King of Comedy, so, but
In our lives, a million
yeah.
times,
But
we
meaning
didn't go shot
that's
for
exactly
shot.
right. Yeah. And even Taxi Driver, I hadn't seen in 10 years, but I did look at it a little bit specifically to replicate. We talked a little bit about like as if it felt like it could have been made in that time. That was like the main influence of those movies of that era. It was like,
Yeah, to me, it's funny when we would talk about these things and having it look like that. Anytime we set up a shot to actually look like that, it didn't feel like this film. So, in a weird way, it was just in the DNA of the movie. I kind of say it as like, I just wanted to feel like it could have come out in the summer of 1979. But it's not necessarily, while Scott and I for sure referenced all those movies when we were writing it and we watched all those movies, just as far as pace and tone. When we got down to shooting it, it's not like you go, oh, that's the shot from so and so, and that's the thing. It was just more in its blood, so to speak.
Jeff, something that is really interesting about your editing in this movie is you're dealing with a very unreliable narrator. And I think watching it again tonight, and this was my second viewing, and I really appreciated the way you kind of calibrated how much we know, what's real, what's clear, what's ambiguous. How difficult was that, sort of modulating that throughout the editing process?
I think the most difficult thing really was modulating that. Each individual scene was always kind of working, but actually putting them in the right order and saying, okay, how do we tighten the screws on Arthur, and at the same time, like loosen the leash on Joker over the course of the movie, was I guess the biggest challenge, and something that I think from day one through even during production we were looking at.
Yeah, well, the whole evolution of him, from Arthur to Joker is really nice, sort of steady and sort of creeps up on you. And Larry, what were you thinking photographically in terms of, conveying that to the audience, that change?
I mean, a lot of it was compositional things in terms of just giving him a different kind of weight and perspective as he became Joker, a little bit more power. Some of that was compositional stuff, some was lighting, keeping him, like Todd had early on in the process had mentioned this thing about the shadow of a man, and that what if you were actually your shadow instead of your sort of lit self, and you were the darkest part of yourself. And I kind of held on to that, and then would write things in the margins of scenes to sort of subtly show that photographically through lighting, in terms of not just the physical darkness, but how he sat against his landscape, whether it was more silhouetted, shadows in the frame, those kind of things. I mean, there's never a shot in the movie that's at eye level, and that was intentional from the beginning, that even when he's Arthur, there's always just slightly odd framing, and we tried to do that throughout the movie, to just set him either small in frames to show his insignificance in a larger world, or when we were very close with him, to just be at an angle that was not traditional, and tried to do that throughout the movie.
Well, and on a technical level, I'm curious how you arrived at the idea of shooting it with large format digital. I mean, did you guys ever talk about doing it on film, since it was a period piece?
I'm laughing because that's all we talked about, and we did so many tests and so many things. I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I mean, literally, it was like the first thing we said when he handed me the script was, it was like, we're shooting on film. We're not doing this digital bullshit. And I'm like, you got it, boss. And then we shot Ares 65 digital.
Because we tested it a
yes,
million
exactly right. So we got there a little bit for various reasons. First of all, we actually wanted to shoot large format film, and even with a movie of this budget, it was still not really feasible. The cameras weren't available. It was too much money. There are, things like that.
That was the original thing, was to shoot large format film, and then Warner Brothers kind of shut us down on that, quite frankly. And then I was like, all right, well, then I even said to you, we got to shoot 16 millimeter film at one point.
Yeah, to go even further against
Let's go in the other direction.
Right.
I just wanted to, I thought, like your initial instinct, well, we're setting it then. We're saying it came out in the summer of 79. We should shoot it on film. But then when we started running tests, and we really wanted, so much of all this stuff was about Joaquin. And because it just reminded me when you were talking to Jeff about, the balance of certain things, and it was all to honor his performance. And the more I got to know Joaquin, the more I realized we want to be able to be on our feet, move rather quickly, light the room. So Joaquin isn't the kind of actor where you go, all right, you're going to walk in this door, you're going to sit here, you pick up this water, and then on that line you get up and walk over there. It's just not that guy, which is what makes him amazing. So Larry had to light rooms so we could shoot in any direction at any time and do anything. And I think we realized after because I was spending months with Joaquin talking about the script, and Larry spending a couple months as we're doing camera tests telling me why digital for this would be better. And I'm going, you know what, knowing what I'm dealing with Joaquin in a great way, the freedom and the flexibility that he would want, it just made sense.
That's right. And frankly, and I am a fan as a cinematographer, I actually recognize the attributes that digital has, and the photography elements and the precision and all these things, but I also recognize this intrinsic thing and this aspect of the magic is gone with digital, and I really respected that with Todd, because it's a distraction, like to see exactly what you're going to do instead of seeing some crappy monitor, and then the next day it's magical when you get it back from the lab. I respect that even more now, having shot digital. And so my promise to Todd was like, if we do it this way, I promise we will try to stay as true to a chemical look as we possibly can. And so I worked really hard to give it a look that my only goal, frankly, was that at some point in the process, Todd wasn't going to turn to me and go, "Oh, we should have shot film." It still might happen, by the way. Like it's like the weekend's still young, but like, but nonetheless, he hasn't, and I'm really happy with the way the movie looks. And we've tricked a lot of people into thinking it was shot on film, and in large part, that was a thing about the look: was what are those qualities that film has, and how can you replicate that better?
Yeah, it's funny because, not to make this a film digital thing, but ultimately the key to the movie was that it felt handmade to me and intimate, and that was a thing I just didn't feel you'd feel with digital. But weirdly, when we started doing these tests and the way Larry shoots and the way Larry lights, it actually felt more handmade to me the way he was doing it. So that was kind of the ultimate decision.
Yeah, it actually allowed us to do this improvisational thing from a camera standpoint with Joaquin in a way that technically we weren't going to have that terrible phone call of like that whole take is just out of focus enough that it's unusable, and that would have been just tragedy because there were a lot of times in which one take was all we were going to get of that thing. Joaquin's beautiful in the way that he doesn't really give you the same thing twice in the best possible way.
Which brings us back to Jeff, because that is really the magic of and really what Jeff and I tried to do in the editing room was honor that performance and what you just said, that transformation from Arthur to Joker does not happen he doesn't walk into a phone booth and come out and he's Joker. It happens over 2 hours. It's this slow burn. So I think Jeff's biggest job in the editing room was honoring that performance and keeping that really slow burn going with at the same time with never having the same thing done twice.
Right. Well, I wanted to ask you about that, Jeff. I mean, the challenge of how many takes do you have of any given scene of Joaquin, and how, if they're all different, how are you making those decisions throughout which take to use? I mean, are some clearly the best, or is he giving you 4 equally great versions that are totally different, and you have to choose between them?
He was giving 4 equally great versions. I think the way that you ultimately do it is you just start building it. You take what you think is the best at the time, and then you build the context around it. And then as that context changes, the best take changes. Or it doesn't. I mean, sometimes you get it right on the first try, and sometimes it's a different thing. But we did ultimately, in wanting to honor that performance, kind of go back through and remove cuts from the movie just to make sure that we weren't over-manipulating what he was doing.
I want to thank you guys for coming and talking
Great,
about the
thank
movie
you.
with us.